If you're just starting off with houseplants, or you've had houseplants in your collection or your home for a while, or you are approaching kind of expert level and you've always wondered what maybe are some of the first things to get as you transition through these plant collecting levels, stick around with me and let me give you my 2 cents. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, I thought this might be an interesting little topic to discuss, and again, these are going to be my opinions based on my experiences, they're not exhaustive, but it's somewhere for us to start a conversation. And as always, do let me know your thoughts down below. But because I do have a lot to get through, let's dive straight into the beginners. So if you are a beginner and you're just starting off, whether or not you know that you're going to go towards becoming a bit of a plant collector, or you just want a few plants to have in your house, but you maybe want to challenge yourself a bit more, here is my suggested starter pack and reasons behind it. So first, I would suggest, and I'm starting strong with this, and anybody who's had plants will be a bit surprised that I'm going to add this on here, start with a Maranta. Not necessarily a Calathea, because I know you're going to want to go for a Calathea. And yes, by all means, I never want to discourage anybody from trying Calatheas. I wouldn't dream of doing that, because I also know that there's a lot of you that watch my channel who have had great success with Calatheas. So I think some of that narrative does need to get tweaked slightly, because everybody's just like, don't go for a Calatheas because it's scarred so many people. But I know for a lot of people, they've had great success. So I'm saying start with a Maranta. They look quite interesting. They'll do the prayer planty thing where they'll move their leaves up at night. But generally speaking, if you're just starting off, they're a lot more forgiving, and it will kind of train you a bit better as to what you need to do for similar type plants, like your Calatheas, like your Tenanthes, Stramanthes, all of these things, to keep them happy. But these are much more forgiving. So if you're first starting off, forgiveness is a good thing with most plants. The next one is you're probably going to get everybody and their mother saying, you need to get a pothos, a golden pothos, get one of these, everybody finds them super easy. I agree, but I would say if you want to try something a bit different, which isn't any more difficult, at least in my experience, go for something like the Pothos Enjoy or the Epipremnum Enjoy. You'll get some white, lily white variegation, generally quite stable, not a particularly fussy plant, and it's, in my humblest of opinions, a lot more interesting than just your standard golden pothos that has been around for decades. I'm also not saying don't go for a golden pothos. If that's your only option, you can only get a golden pothos, go for a golden pothos, but you do need a version of this plant in your collection, if for nothing else, for it to be the stable plant that you don't have to worry about quite as much as the rest of them. And then again, I would be remiss if I was not going to suggest at least one ficus. And no, it's not going to be the fiddle leaf fig. It will be the Ficus elastica. So you can either go for something like this, which is mine. My version is the kind of variegated one that starts off a bit more pinkish, which is the Taniki, if I'm not mistaken. There's Belize as well. There's a whole slew of them out there that you can attempt to grow. By and large, in terms of ficuses, they tend to be the most forgiving, at least in my humblest of opinions. So definitely getting something like this. You can get this in tree form, you can get this in more columnar, you can get them small, you can get them large. They've been around for ages, and there's a good reason why they've been around for ages. So if you want to challenge yourself with a bit more of a ficus, and you won't get leaves like this very often at the beginner stage, definitely try something like the Ficus elastica. And then you might be wondering, it's just like, but can I get a philodendron? And I'm not going to suggest the obvious option here, which is everybody's suggestion in the beginning, go for a micans or go for a heartleaf philodendron, the kind of scandens. I would actually say if you can find it, because sometimes it can be challenging to find, go for something like a philodendron Prince of Orange. You'll get that interest that will keep you coming back for more, because the other two options are great, but they lose that kind of sparkle quite early on, and you're just like, oh, I'm growing yet again another greenish type plant. One might be on the velvety side with the micans, but It's not something you're going to get super excited with, at least I didn't. But the Philodendron Prince of Orange, if you can get it, stunning plant. And you'll get a plant that does come in that orange, and everybody's just like, it's one of those things that's like, ugh, what is the expression? A puppy isn't just for Christmas. When people buy somebody a puppy for Christmas, it's a lifetime kind of commitment. It's the same thing. The Philodendron Prince of Orange isn't just a fall plant, or it isn't just a Halloween plant just because it's got that orange emergent leaf. It is a plant that you're going to enjoy year round. And part of the reason why I'm adding this onto here is because it's possibly been one of the least fussy philodendrons I've ever grown, and it definitely makes a bit of a statement because it can get quite large. But then I hear you saying, but can I try some anthuriums? Maybe an anthurium? Maybe something a bit more interesting? Yes. For this, I would suggest, and even though I've not had the best experiences with this, and this is maybe a bit of a caveat for somebody who tends to be an overcarer or an overwaterer, be careful of this one. But if you're anybody else and you're just starting off and you're not sure that you want to be hovering over plants, and probably if you're a beginner, you probably won't because you're not kind of baked into that mentality just yet, go for something like an Anthurium clarinervium. There's a reason why they are everywhere. And yeah, they are the type of plant that will give you that wow factor because you can get some relatively large specimens now. They're not massively expensive, and you'll get that veination, which is quite interesting. They're more forgiving with the watering, especially if you're a bit more of an underwater. Great beginner friendly anthurium to start off with. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't add at least one alocasia type plant into this list, especially for the beginners. And I'm coming on to the kind of intermediate or enthusiast level just after this. But I would suggest you go for an alocasia odorata. So these are large plants. You're going to need to find a space for them, and they do have certain requirements in terms of light needs, in terms of watering. But the reason why I'm adding it to this list as a beginner, if you want to start with something, is it's a great place to start if you are thinking about going for something like an alocasia or a colocasia. Again, in my humblest of opinions, this is the most forgiving plant within kind of alocasias generally. So if you can keep this happy, then you can start experimenting with some different types of alocasias, but this is a great place to start earning your stripes, so to speak. If you can keep this happy, you can start transitioning a bit more and be a bit more confident whilst you're doing that. So moving on to the next two groups, I'm going to be a bit more selective with this, but again, it's not exhaustive because a lot of you know a lot more about plants. So this is going to be the Enthusiast section, which is kind of intermediate that I'm adding in here, and we'll have the kind of avid collector at the very end as well. So when you're looking at moving into that enthusiast level, that kind of intermediate, oh, this is starting to become a thing that I'm starting to scale up for, and this is a kind of group of people that not a lot of people generally talk to because they're not really beginners anymore, but they've not been doing this for years on end. They're on the journey basically. So some suggestions on that journey for you would be something like adding in, and this links into what I was talking about before about the clarinervium, try something different. Start off with an anthurium crystallinum. Similar vibes to the clarinervium, you get a bit more interest with that silver banding if you're a bit more of an overwaterer, and by now you should start having a good indication as to where you sit in terms of your care towards plants. This is a better option if you're a bit more of an overwaterer or a hovering plant parent. Not saying that this needs an awful lot of water, but what I'm saying is this does need more water than you would do with a clarinervium, which is generally happier to stay a bit more on the drier side a bit more frequently, or at least it won't show you too many like stress issues. The crystallinum starts falling into more of the traditionally what is considered difficult anthuriums, but it's on the lowest end of that entirely. So this is a great place to start. Note how I am not giving you some of the fussiest anthuriums at this point, because it's good to start somewhere where you can build your confidence with them and then transition on from there. Another relatively good one to start off with, another anthurium, because again, if you're moving towards that enthusiast kind of category, you're probably going to be looking a bit more at maybe some more of anthuriums, the Botarifolium. And I've got mine on the corner here, possibly, and I mentioned this on a recent video, and I think some people were just like, really? If not my most favorite anthurium, definitely top three. Definitely top three. So it is one that's different, and this is why I'm adding it onto this list, because by this point, you are probably looking at kind of unusual looking plants. Usually if you start moving towards that enthusiast level, you've seen a lot of the traditional kind of heart-shaped leaf plants, and you're just like, oh, what else is out there? What can I attempt to do? The Vitarifolium is one that will give you that, oh, that's entirely different than anything else that I have. It's got the strappy leaves. It is one of the easier, more difficult anthuriums. And I say this, let me benchmark this for you. So by easy anthurium, no anthurium is particularly easy. By easy anthurium, I mean something like the Anthurium andreanum, which is what people are used to buying in like supermarkets and big box stores with the colorful bracts that people are like, this is a bloom. If you're an enthusiast now, you can correct them onto the fact that that's not entirely accurate. But and the Cryonerium, but then you start moving towards some of these more interesting type of anthuriums. So yes, the Vitarifolium is a great place to start, and you might find it quite a boring place to start when you're looking at kind of more the strappy leaf anthuriums, but it's a good place to start. And anybody who has grown multiple kind of strappy leaf anthuriums will generally agree this is one of the safest options to start off with. And how about we talk about some of those more advanced alocasias that I was talking about before? A good transition if you've kind of kept a lot of alocasias happy for a while, especially the more common varieties like the odorata that I was talking about before, you might want to consider some of the more jewel type alocasias. And if you're going for the smaller alocasia types, the jewels, a good place, at least in my experience, to start off with at that enthusiast level would be something like a dragon scale alocasia. Because yes, it's not as super easy, no alocasia is ever super easy, but it's not as easy as, say, the odorata, but it is heading towards that slightly more, oh, I need to be doing a bit more to this, and you get a stunning payout because, oh, look at the leaves. The fact that something in nature can be produced that looks like that, and I know, oh, I can't remember what the actual word for it is when humans try to put other human traits on things just in order to kind of comprehend them a bit better. Obviously, we can look at that and just go, oh, it looks like a dragon scale. Thus, it's called the dragon scale. In its common term, I think it's a beginda, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of its species. But stunning, stunning plant. Not your usual kind of thing. Definitely something that's going to grab the attention of anybody that comes into your home and just go, what is that? Like, wow. That's a good little plant, and it's a good place to kind of start transitioning into probably what is going to be less straightforward allocations. And please note that I didn't have many or any begonias in the beginner stage. There are some begonias that if you wanted to do a beginner begonia, I would obviously go with the one that everybody tells you to go with, which is the polka dot begonia, or the Begonia maculata whitei. Great place to start, really forgiving in terms of begonias, and it is a cane begonia. But if you want to start transitioning a bit more into rhizomatous begonias, those kind of more low-lying begonias that tend to be a bit fussier, I would suggest that you go for something, and nobody's going to be surprised on my channel, like the Begonia seismorei, Chewbacca, Wookiee, all of these things. Yes, some people might have issues with hairy plants. This is a hairy plant. I'm not going to kind of beat around the bush with that one, but super, super easy, at least in my experience, and from what I've heard from a lot of people who have bought this, who have got an interest in this, this is one of the easier rhizomatous begonias, so this is a great place to transition in from some of the easier cane begonias. Start on easy level on the rhizomatous before you start going, oh, if I can grow this rarest of very expensive like rhizomatous begonias. No, no, no. Remember, still learning in this process, still, and I mean, we're always learning, by the way. At the enthusiast level, this is a great place to start. And then if you wanted to get into some orchids, but maybe you've never grown orchids that maybe are not a Phalaenopsis orchid, and you want to try something a bit different before you start going into things like the brassavolas or the cattleyas, or even kind of like small mounted orchids and all these things, before you do any of that, and I know these plants do grow differently, but it will get you into the mindset of a bit of a fussier and a bit more of I need to kind of adjust conditions around this plant because it's a specific type of orchid. Go for a jewel type orchid. And again, a lot of people would tell you to go with the Laudicea discolor. For me, it's not a particularly interesting plant. It didn't keep my attention personally. I know there's other people out there that probably love this plant. I also found this exceptionally difficult to try, and if that was my only experience with these plants, I would say don't touch jewel orchids based on just my experiences. But the Macodes petola, I think, look at those leaves with the lightning on them. Oh my God. And I found these specific jewel orchids to be a lot easier to take care of than the Laudicea discolor. I don't know why I never got the Laudicea discolor's care down pat. I tried different things. It just did not work for me. And for how dull looking that plant is, just wasn't for me. But the Macodes petola, I found it easier. Was it easier because I was trying harder to keep it happy? Maybe. But again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If a plant is interesting enough that you will do what you need to in order to keep it happy, I think it deserves its place within this section of the list. So let's move on to a bit more of the collectors. Advanced people, seasoned houseplanty people. And you don't need anybody like me, neither does anybody on this list. I was going to say neither do the enthusiasts, but even the beginners, you don't need anybody like me telling you what to do. You will do whatever you want to do. But my humblest of opinion, if I had somebody when I was getting heavily into things and I was becoming a bit more of a collector, sit down and tell me, you know what, get this, 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 and this, and this. It will help you for these reasons. I would have really appreciated it. So I thought, let me share with you what I wish I had when I was at that stage. So the first thing I would say is maybe give a try is any of the dock block hybrid anthuriums, or hybrid anthuriums in general, but for this situation I will use the example of the Zara X Michelle. You get very interesting coloration. You are starting to step up possibly in a bit more of the difficulty because you're probably going to be getting it at a much smaller size rather than a bigger size. So you're going to have to maybe baby it along the way, but the payoff that you get with this is spectacular. And I will say, for a lot of the collectors, you start moving away from that notion of I'm buying this because it's a very different plant to anything else that I own, or I'm buying this plant because I want to wow anybody that comes into my house or into my space, and you start buying things more because you're just like, I like it. And it's maybe a challenge, or it's maybe like a better version of something else that I had before. So you can see some of these plants on this side of the spectrum essentially might not be but that doesn't look particularly different. It doesn't have to if you're at that kind of collector stage. Then, again, linking it back into the kind of alocasias of things, how about you try something that a lot of people have struggled with? And I'm not going to add the Jacqueline on here as well. I wouldn't add that for anybody. But I know too many people that have struggled time and time again with that alocasia for me to ever suggest it on a list like this at any level. However, the alocasia Frydek, the true Frydek, not the alocasia mescalitiana, which is sometimes the all-green form that people will call the Frydek, but the Frydek, the actual variegated form of the mescalitiana, if I'm not mistaken. Stunning plant, variegation is truly beautiful on this, but a lot of people struggle with this. And I have seen even big content creators here who have huge collections, who've been doing this for years, who've been doing content about plants for years as well, still struggle with this plant. And I'm going to put my hands up and say, I still haven't got it 100% right, but I've got it to a stage where I'm just like, okay, this is good. So this is definitely going to be one of the more challenging alocasias. It's not going to be the most challenging alocasia. I would never claim that about any plant. It's also going to be personal to you and your care and your experiences. I keep saying this. But this is one that a lot of people struggle with. So this is a nice challenge type alocasia. And it's also got the added bonus of it being variegated. And actually, to be fair, I quite like the variegation on this. I quite like how it comes out. And it is relatively white type of variegation, because a lot of the times with the alocasias, you tend to get darker green versus lighter green, or darker green versus yellow. very few will have that white variegation. You might get some of the allocations that are coming out now from TC, which have got colorful variegations, but very few, as far as I'm aware at least, have that true white variegation. So for that reason, the fried egg needs to be on this list for me. Yeah. And note how this is only showing up now. And again, this is for people that are just moving into the category of collector from enthusiast, not people that have been collectors for years. The Queen Anthurium. So you can see mine behind here. I was able to finally move its newest leaf, so you can kind of see it there. The Anthurium warocqueanum. And this is a plant that everybody and their mother at beginner stage, at enthusiast stage, would like to grow this. I am going to be super unpopular online by saying this. Humblest of opinions, I do think that this needs to wait until you've, and again, I hate this expression, earned your stripes along the way, because that is one of the more challenging type of anthuriums. Granted, when you do get it happy and you get it sizing up, it is beautiful, absolutely stunning. Do not get me wrong with that one. So much heartache from one specific plant that I know. This is almost at the level of the melanochrysis or the melanochrysum, but I know more people will stick with this and have stuck with this time and time and time again through heartache and more heartache and more heartache to get the Queen Anthurium happy over the people that have maybe tried the melanochrysum a few times and have eventually given up on it, basically. So for that reason alone, this is one that I would say at this stage and this stage only, should you really be looking at it if you want to have a good chance of success. Yes, there's going to be flukes. Yes, there's going to be somebody who's just got the ideal conditions and there's the ideal personality type that will keep it happy at a beginner stage or even a kind of enthusiast, kind of intermediate stage. But by and large, based on everything that I've been seeing online for years, this is one that I would say this would be the time for you to challenge yourself and get something like this at a collector stage. Yeah. Okay, and the next one is a Monstera. And this is one that I've bought recently. There's a few of us that bought this recently. Renee, hi, I know yours is doing relatively okay at the moment, but the Monstera White Monster. Highly, highly variegated. A lot of the ones that came out were very, very young TC plantlets, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they were just standard propagation. I think they were all TC. And I know from a lot of people that I'm seeing online that they haven't been the easiest of plants to deal with. But again, at this stage, you've probably maybe dealt with a Monstera albo, you've maybe had some experiences with the Thai constellation. You're starting to cut your teeth a bit more on variegated Monsteras, and this, as well as the fact that they tend to be smaller, younger plantlets or even TC plantlets, by and large means that they're not as straightforward. Don't get me wrong, we all bought them with the expectation that they're going to be nice and big and lush and beautiful at some point, but we're all kind of slightly starting to realize that, this is maybe not as straightforward as I thought it was going to be, and it's also not as fast as any of the other variegated Monsteras. And by the way, I'm using the White Monster on this. I know there's a lot more different types of variegated Monsteras other than just the original kind of Monstera alba or the Thai constellation. I'm kind of lumping most of them into here. I haven't had any experience with the rest of them, so I can specifically talk about the White Monster. But yeah, this is the kind of plant stage that I would say is probably good to be attempting that. Maybe not for the beginners or even the enthusiasts. That brings me on nicely to TC clones. And by that, I mean the types of TC clones that we're seeing coming onto the market now, where you are literally getting a clone of the TC. Sometimes it's in its own gel-like material as well, so you need to have done enough research, know what you're doing in order to be able to transition it out of there. I'm not even talking about the TC clones like the White Monster that I was talking about before, which was a plant already transitioned into soil and probably had a bit more established time within that soil structure. I am talking about literally this has come from the lab or from whoever was creating the TC clones. You deal with it. And they are relatively expensive for what they are these days, which is a relatively small plant that does have all the features that you want, that has had TC, not saying that TC plants are any weaker than any other plant that has been necessarily propagated, and I know there's going to be a lot of debate in the comments down below. Please feel free to have that debate if you want. But these are not the most straightforward thing, and I would be so remiss if I would be sitting there suggesting this to people that are just moving into enthusiast kind of class, or definitely not the beginners, because this needs to have some knowledge behind it before you can even attempt it. It's a good one for the collector stage because it might challenge you a bit more, and it's something new for you to play around with. And then let's talk about some begonias now. I can talk about 2 begonias that I've grown and one that I haven't grown, but from what I've heard. So staying on the rhizomatous begonias because they tend to be a bit more challenging. And if Bearpaw Arrowwood sees this, hi, feel free to chip in down below. I know you've got a lot of experience with this as well. But it is one of those things that maybe something like the Melanobulata or even the Ferox, they're both very similar. They've got those bullate leaves and the spiky leaves and all of these things, but they are not the most straightforward rhizomatous begonia to care for. You also need to be doing, the reason why I'm adding things like this is because some of these begonias come from very specific parts of the world. So for instance, if I'm not mistaken, the Ferox is one that likes slightly more acidic soil because of, I think it grows near or on limestone. So it prefers a bit more acidic. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but I remember doing the research when I was kind of getting it. So that's going to be something that the average person or even an enthusiast probably isn't going to even bother checking that necessarily. But if you're getting that plant and you're just like, why isn't it working? Do some of that research. That's why I'm adding these types of plants here, because they're going to have slightly more specific care needs than your average begonia. The other one that obviously could be added here, and this is one I've never owned, I do think they did come onto the market at some point a bit more frequently, the Darth Vaderiano, basically, I think that's what it was called. The one that was named after Darth Vader, which is almost entirely black with that gold band around the leaf. Beautiful plant. I would have happily wanted to attempt it, but I know a lot of people who attempted it, but did not grow it particularly well. And it was very much like the only ones that were getting, and even that wasn't perfect, is the ones that would have like a glass dome over the plant. And to me, it starts becoming, I mean, no shade to anybody who wants to do that, but for me, it's very reminiscent of kind of something like, you know, the rose, the wilting rose in Beauty and the Beast that was under glass. It becomes a very impersonal thing, like, for me. For the people that see some of their plants more like art as well at the same time, that could work. But again, these are begonia types that are going to challenge you, so they're great for this stage. And I'll wrap up with a philodendron, which is the philodendron snowdrift. I tried 2 times, 3 times potentially at this point. And I found a bigger version of it, but it still wasn't big enough at the garden center the other day, and I'm just like, do I pick this up? No, I've been burnt too many times, I don't want to. Beautiful plant, highly challenging. I will add in, what was the Philodendron Ilsmanii, that's the one I think. That's got a very similar vibe. That one is even harder than the snowdrift, and having experienced the failure of the snowdrift a few times over, I wouldn't touch the Ilsmanii with a barge pole, considering how much more expensive it is. No. But, and you might be asking yourself, well, why are you suggesting it to us if you've struggled with it? That's the reason. Like, I didn't have good success with it, but I know a few people who have had good success. And it is a beautiful plant. It's a very unusual looking plant in the sense that you're just like, how are you surviving? There is hardly any green on you. So the way to think about some of these plants is if you imagine a green plant, which is the smallest splash of white variegation, and do the polar opposite of that. So you're almost getting entirely white plants with just the smallest splash of green, and just like, how are you photosynthesizing? Stunning plants. But again, a bit more of the collector level, a bit more of that advanced stage, because it's going to challenge you a bit more. But yes, that was my list. As I said, it's not exhaustive for anybody. It's not me dictating that if you're at this stage, you need to be getting these plants. But it's a place for us to start having some of these conversations. These are my experiences, my opinions, based on my experiences, but we're not all the same. We're not all growing in the same conditions. We will all have differing opinions as to maybe what. Think about it this way, and put it in the comments if you want to. I know a lot of you do like writing long comments, and this might be a good opportunity for you to expand, and I love reading all of your comments, even the long ones. So what would your suggestions be? You don't have to go into a huge list, but maybe give me one plant for if somebody's just a beginner, one plant if somebody's coming into becoming a bit more of an intermediate person, and maybe one plant for the collectors or just somebody who's just going to become a collector now. And let me know down below. Let's have that conversation. But yes, I think that's everything I wanted to say today. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.